There are three key fertility programs that dairy producers can use in their lactating dairy cows. These programs utilize prostaglandin F2 alpha and gonadotropin releasing hormone to synchronize follicle and CL development in ovaries. These programs are now referred to as fertility programs because they increase pregnancies per AI in our lactating dairy cows. Currently, there are three programs in use. Presync 10 or Presync 11, both work about the same way except injections are given on a different day. Double OvSync, and the third one is G6G. All three programs utilize OvSync, but the three programs are different due to the presynchrony differences in each of the programs. Presync 11 has 2 injections of prostaglandin F2 alpha administered 14 days apart and either 10 or 11 days from the second injection to the start of OvSync. Double OvSync takes advantage of 2 OvSyncs, with the first OvSync being utilized as a presynchrony OvSync. The first GnRH of the second OvSync is administered 1 week after the final GnRH of the first OvSync. G6G utilizes both prostaglandin F2 alpha and GnRH as presynchrony injections. The prostaglandin F2 alpha is given 2 days prior to the GnRH, and the GnRH is given either 6 or 7 days prior to the first GnRH of OvSync. As an example, I will go through the G6G program and describe why G6G enhances fertility of lactating dairy cows in a very similar way to Presync 10 or 11 and double OvSync. The first prostaglandin of G6G is administered at a random stage of the estrus cycle. Two days later, gonadotropin releasing hormone is administered to ovulate a follicle. So if both injections are successful, the prostaglandin F2 alpha injection will regress a corpus luteum, and the GnRH will cause ovulation of a follicle. With G6G, the first GnRH of OvSync is administered 6 days after the presynchrony GnRH. Theoretically, if cows respond to the PG and GnRH presynchrony injections, cows will be on day 6 of the estrus cycle when the first GnRH of OvSync is administered. This is an ideal day since about 90% of cows on day 6 will respond to the GnRH injection. If cows respond to the first GnRH of OvSync with ovulation, a new CL will form and also a new follicular wave will develop. These two critical events are necessary for the increase in fertility of the lactating dairy cows. The new CL that forms will increase endogenous progesterone concentrations. The induction of a new wave of follicles will ensure that the subsequent ovulatory follicle will be at a minimum age at the time of the GnRH-induced LH surge. During the 7-day period between the GnRH and prostaglandin F2 alpha of OvSync, a follicle will develop from the new wave and develop into an ovulatory size follicle and will likely be functional at the time of the prostaglandin F2 alpha injection. Also during this 7-day period, the new CL will continue to grow and develop and will add 50% more progesterone in circulation at the time just prior to the prostaglandin F2 alpha injection. Another key event in fertility programs is the ability to regress corpora lutea at the time of the prostaglandin F2 alpha injection of OvSync. If cows responded to the presynchrony injections and to the first GnRH of OvSync, there should be at least 2 corpora lutea at the time of prostaglandin F2 alpha to regress. 56 hours after the first prostaglandin F2 alpha, regardless if there is a second prostaglandin F2 alpha administered, a GnRH injection is administered to cause ovulation of the newly formed ovulatory follicle. Our data indicates that ovulation will occur 24 to 32 hours after the injection of GnRH. Ideally, cows should be inseminated approximately 16 hours after the final injection of GnRH. This allows sufficient time for sperm to go through capacitation and still be there in large numbers at the time of ovulation. In a very large data set from our laboratory, these 3 programs compared favorably to each other, each having about 45% conception rates to first service. In this large data set, it appeared that the higher the progesterone just prior to the prostaglandin F2 alpha of OVSYNC, the greater the conception rates. It is likely that the increase in fertility is due both to progesterone and the control of the age of the ovulatory follicle from these fertility programs.